So briefly talk about our next presenter. We are very pleased to bring Janaina Moraes. Janaina Moraes is a Brazilian artist based in Aotearoa, New Zealand, and Janaina navigates between dance, language, performance, pedagogy, and research as entangled, expanded art forms. Focusing in invitation poetics, she proposed choreography as events that create temporary containers for togethering. Currently, she is a PhD candidate and lecturer in dance studies at the Waipapa Taumata Rao University of Auckland. Please welcome Janaina.
Kia ora. Thank you, Marcos. It's a pleasure and an honor myself to be invited to this beautiful gathering. I will start by saying that I'm terrible with following time, so I have a chronometer with me. So I will literally just pause my talk whenever it pauses itself, which is in a way a practice that I do already constantly in my improvisations and dances. I do rely with rambling and dwelling in whatever time allows us to do, and then we leave with probably unfinished discussions that hopefully will bring more conversations for future conversations. So I really appreciate, just wanted to start by acknowledging this honor to be here and the invitation by Marcos and Dr. Bufari. Also, I appreciate Thiago Rebouças, who have been in the background really supporting from a few weeks now with presentations. And also the translators Cristiano and Natalia, who I had the pleasure to briefly meet beforehand. And then I really appreciate that you're doing this work, because translation and mistranslation is a big part of my work, which I'll just start sharing this screen before I get too caught up. Here we go, where I am. So if you just let me see. Okay, I think you might be seeing now. So just to really acknowledge that the importance of the translators and this process of expanding the conversation across countries. And I think this work that I have been doing, this notion of residing, residencing, dancing, all these entanglements with the words, with the notions of poetics, how do we exist in a world that really can change and shift all the time, and it is changing and shifting all the time, and how do we follow these changes, and how do we attend and notice these changes as part of our embodied experiential existence in and with the world. So I also wanted to acknowledge, so I'm speaking now from Tamaki Makaurau, Auckland, Aotearoa, New Zealand. I came from Brazil, in Brasília, the capital of Brazil, inland. And I'm coming back, returning to this conversation about my PhD, who is quite recently coming to an end of this cycle in academia in the Waipapa Taumata Rao, in the University of Auckland, as I also transition again to another part of my journey in art, academia, or in life, which are very much entangled, going to Otautahi in the South Island, Christchurch, very soon, in a week. So I think this is a beautiful way of acknowledging this traveling and this migratory experiences that I have been going through and across. And as I speak, I will leave some movements happening on the screen. So feel welcome to really allow yourself to be confused about the words I'm speaking sonically, but also the words you can see moving on the screen. I think that's experiment in this sharing. that I have been really interested in how can I embody and how can I express or share the different and confusing. So I really appreciate Tatiana also acknowledging her beautiful sharing when she talks about confusion and dreaming. This has been a lot in my work, directly and indirectly as well. So how do I acknowledge all this confusion of coming to another territory and finding myself a Brazilian white body in Brazil, finding myself a person of color in Aotearoa, and finding my connections with all my Latinity and crossing the relations with Portuguese, becoming suddenly closer to Spanish with my Argentinian friends who I was connecting mostly during the pandemic, and living in an English world or land that is pretty much full of Tereo, Maori, indigenous language. So yeah, just to present a few of the provocations I felt in my body during this arrival, and also these multiple arrivals. So I wanted to also, and this is the sharing, but also still an introduction of my arrival here at Link Conference, that I also want to share the process of this now next 15 minutes of conversation, of sharing. And then I just wanted to say that I will be, as I said, rambling around some of the ideas. Of course, I will not go through the whole desired sharing that I prepared, but I will, after 20 minutes of talking to you, I would love to do a little pause and just check in if there is any reflections or questions or desire to dialogue with my words and ideas, and then I keep up with the next 10 minutes. As we go along this journey. So I have been, as Marcus kindly introduced me, I have been working in the entanglement in this. At the same time that it's entangling, it's expanding the notion of dance, choreography, what is a choreographic experience, language, pedagogy, education. So all of those maybe containers or tags or labels or categories that we find ourselves in, or that I found myself in across my journey in life, art, and academia, they have been coming more and more place or new territories to explore this diasporic body that feels always moving, always finding displacement, always finding a new arrival, a new placement. And I like to open, or to keep opening the conversation with this little haiku or little poem verse that I came up with one of the arrivals in my thesis, which is speaking to these images of making poems from the sky of the mouth. I love this image that maybe it's being poorly translated to English, but I love that we call the sky of the mouth in our inner top part of the mouth in Portuguese, céu da boca, because I think this brings me a lot of perspective and invitations to think of all this cosmology that we are as beings in the world, and that this pathway to New Zealand, to Aotearoa, have been inviting me to be more and more aware of. And olhando para dentro, como quem toca o teto com a língua. So how do I keep looking inwards by touching outwards the sky, and the sky that begins with our own tongues. I would also love to dedicate, as I dedicated my thesis, this sharing as well to all the dreamers around the world, because one of the things that I've been more and more connecting with understanding in learning and in practice research is how we can allow ourselves more and more to not be certain, not to be sure, and not to be too right, but allow the confusion and the blurriness and the and the weirdness sometimes of dreams. And you're gonna see, and these are some screenshots of my thesis that soon hopefully will be publicized after going the procedures of the examination. But for each part of the process of becoming this thesis as a choreographic experiment, so the notion of writing as a choreography, how can I write as movement practice, a way of writing and collaging and making visuality that really acknowledges different times and space that we can relate with the reading, the pausing in onto a page. So you're going to see some collages that I do as a choreographic exercise. So this is one of the maybe examples of how my practice explores or experiments with this entanglement of forms. How do I think dance beyond the human body, but also through the gestures of putting things in contact, finding things, and confusing the logics. So when we come to the notion of falling, for instance, which is one of the first ways of arriving to this conversation, probably, which for me, always when I think about falling, I think a little bit about failing as well, and how to embrace or invite this notion of, oh, am I failing already? Am I being too confused already in my talk? Am I rambling too much? But also allowing this almost adrenaline of the fall. How do I fall into this space of conversation through Zoom without letting my heart not feel the pumping that's getting now, how I'm getting like anxious, and how my talk speeds up, and how I'm in the background thinking, oh, poor translator, thank you for doing this hard work of keeping up with my pace. So all of those things I don't take for granted, and I think they are part of the work. So I would say that one of the first provocations, like going back with this image of falling, is one of these beautiful quotes from Ailton Krenak is an excerpt of a book from The Ideas to Postpone the End of the World, Ideias para Adiar o Fim do Mundo, where he says, or he questions, why does it make us feel so uncomfortable with the fall? And I think this is a beautiful provocation because, and this could go for many directions. I could be speaking now about dance and creative process. I could be speaking about writing, about meeting a new person, making friends, living life, or talking about politics. Why are we so afraid of encountering with the conflict, with the fall, with the moment of, I don't know what's happening? Why do we keep so tight to the planned or the ideal ideas? And I think this work with residing or residencing has been inviting me a lot about, okay, let's dwell with what's here now, and with the promise also of the fall, with the possibility of falling and finding a new direction. And I find quite beautiful how it brings then let's take advantage of all the critical and the creative capacity to build colorful parachutes, to make our own ways, to find how to navigate and make the fall a fly. And I think that's one of the images that I have been carrying, or that the image has been carrying me through these multiple journeys of arriving and departing through notions or ideas or understandings in the world. So yeah, as I have been speaking a bit, this whole notion of entangled ideas of what is to arrive, what is to depart, when those two not only points but areas meet. So expanding a little bit the notion of, okay, I arrived to the right point of my work, or I arrived to the right part of my life, the planned decision. And how can we be aware that each arrival is also a potential departure? And each time that I have to let go of things and depart from an idea, an object, a sensation, a project, even, how this also announces another possibility of arriving somewhere else. So really entangling and confusing again this temporality, spiraling the temporality of a project, of a relationship, thinking about projects as relationships. So I'm just sharing and rambling again, just to remind that's no problem if you're getting like, what are you talking about? You can just grasp on whatever works for you. That's been my practice as a migrant, hearing and grasping on what makes sense at the time for me. In this journey, I have noticed again how language became a very important thing. One of the things that I noticed in my practice was returning to a lot of Brazilian Portuguese words. So really trying to understand, I think being exposed literally and so fascinated about the presence of traditional native language, and learning tereo through not fully knowing what it is, but just hearing all the time in Aotearoa so many words that resemble in sonority, even with our pronunciation of vowels in Portuguese, and making me question which are what's my language, what's my mother tongue teaching me. That's also bringing me closer, not to the colonial Janaina from Brazil, but to the Brazilian, Latina, Brazilian Portuguese speaker. It became quite important to differentiate or to learn a little bit closer which are the difference, which are the rich roots that I don't know much from my own language. And then one of the words that I started bringing a lot of Brazilian Portuguese words. And when I say Brazilian Portuguese, I'm meaning more the words that probably in Portugal they don't use, or that they have very specific influence from other African and indigenous languages in Brazil, like Tupi, Guarani, Kikongo. And one of them was this idea of why can't I start to think of my research practice in academia as a practice that is a dengosa practice, a practice that engages with dengo. Dengo is a word from roots in the Kikongo language, an Africa root language in Brazil, which, I mean, again, there is no specific right translation to it, but the way I like to think of it, or my affections bring memories of it, it's when I hear something about dengo, it can have two different kind of tonalities. One would be the first one that kind of might became quite popular and a little bit pejorative, was like, chega de dengo. Stop with dengo. That's like you are being too, like too, almost like immature, or too like, grow up. But the other way, and I think that's quite beautiful that they've shared these two faces. The other way is actually acknowledging that dengo is, and in Kikongo language, is originated by this notion of this affection, this welcoming and cozy affection of bringing you in a hard time. So when you are having that very strong and laborious day and tiring day, or something is not feeling right, and you have someone, a dengo, or you have something, or you have yourself, and you find a moment to accommodate. So I feel like, how can I make my practice become this, almost like going back to some sense of almost becoming not childish, but becoming playful and curious as a kid again, but also acknowledging the coziness and the welcoming and the notions of being with care and with kindness. I have been also looking a lot about this idea of formação, how I understand that the genealogy of my practice, or the journey in my way of creating and making ideas of things or conversations of friends. I feel all of these are related. Like a lot of my work is about making friends and getting to understand other ways of coexisting with another that's not me, and learning with them. So formação became a very important word that I chose not to translate to English, because I think also sits in this between space where I'm talking about formação as something that is a training or a background, a pedagogical background. Qual é a sua formação? We would ask for like, what's your background? What did you train in school? But it also has this very beautiful root etymologically and even meaning in Portuguese of what forms you, what's your formation, what are you composed by? And I think that's a very beautiful image to remember, that formação is beyond the scholarly, it's beyond the training, but it's very much about the schooling that life gives us through the encounters, through meeting with someone, through hearing someone, through talking with, through making mistakes as you talk with each other, and through not talking. So in dance, we have a lot of these ideas of like, how can we share an experience through silence, but through listening our bodies that connect in specific ways. As I said, I would be aware of my 20 minutes mark. I am in slide 9 of 48, just as a disclosure. And I was just checking to see if there is any, at this point, specific reflections or questions or reorientations of my talk before I keep in the next 10 minutes.
Janaina, we have 4 minutes more, 5 minutes more at most, and we would try to leave the questions for the end if possible.
Oh, we have 4 more?
Yeah.
Minutes? Amazing.
Well, yeah, we have 4 or 5 minutes, let's say, depending on how much we are going to leave for the questions.
I am happy to just check in if there is any question, because I think I work better with having someone to talk to. So if you want to open now, if there is any, if there is none, I can keep talking.
None that I can see on the chat. So guys, please leave your comments or questions on the chat.
So let's just say, if there is any, you can just interrupt me. I would love that.
Okay.
Thank you.
I will do that.
One of the other images that came to me is so again, with this notion of welcoming and finding and looking for the experiences where I felt welcomed in another territory, or that I was feeling that I could work to welcome someone else, another in my experience. Of course, the notion of invitation came strongly, and one of the things that I started to learn about invitation is actually, again, looking back at the etymology of the word, that is related directly to the notion of desiring, or pleasure, or wantingness. And this was a very exciting discovery to make when noticing that actually in Portuguese we have invitation has the prefix convite. So I started to ask myself how my practice can enable experiences or exercises of desiring with. How can I desire my own desires? I have a sense of awareness of what I do want to do or to engage with in life, but being aware of someone else's desires and acknowledging that when we desire together, we don't necessarily need to desire the same thing. So convite, or invitation, became this logic or this ethics of really acknowledging the multiple desires that the world vibrates. And it could be pretty much about like, what's the desire of my own sense as a person and another person when we come in a conversation or in a collaboration, but also what's the desires of the that beyond humanity. So the non-human or more than human are letting me are giving me back. So how to be aware of the desires of the land, the desires of the trees, the desires of the time, and really tap into this sense of moving through a sense of pleasuring, having pleasure together, claiming pleasure as something that sometimes is seen as luxury, but how can we claim pleasure as a basic right, in a way? I have also encountered with all these notions of inviting, coming together, having pleasure, and coexisting, living together. I started to understand the importance of food. So really tapping into the notion of devouring, really expanding or allowing myself to experience moments where I can have a feast with other people. And this could be literally just sitting with people and eating, cooking together, experiencing this the choreographies of making food for each other, the affections this create, the learning this brings, but also expanding expanding the awareness of what eating might mean, or offering food. So really seeing ideas as food, seeing the ways we navigate in the world, the language we share, all of those indirect nourishment, or very direct nourishment, but don't come from ailment. How can we really feast ourselves and really allow ourselves to ingest other food, and to acknowledge the process of digestion, and acknowledge the things that become us as we eat this food, and acknowledge the things that we let go of, to make room and to fertilize future life. So really acknowledging all those cycles.
Sorry to interrupt, Janaina. It's just
yes.
that you said we have a couple of questions if you want to take them now.
Yes, please.
Can I ask them for you, Marcos?
Yes, absolutely. I have them here. I can read for Janaina. So
go ahead.
Yeah, the first one is why this interest by language, where it came from. It is inspiring to see this interest in someone who developed works in the dance field. Por que esse interesse pela língua? De onde veio? É inspirador ver esse interesse de alguém que desenvolve trabalhos na área de dança.
Thank you. I think language, I always notice asked why dancers are seen as silent people or behave as silent. So when we think of dance, when we think of drama or performing arts in more like a theatrical sense, we would associate language and voice a lot. And I was really curious why if language, with tongue, the lingua is a body part, why not all this notion that we create from it be acknowledged as a body itself? I think this was a personal question for myself, a desire to speak and to acknowledge the way I understand things. I feel I'm quite visual. I don't know if that's a reference for everyone probably in Brazil, from my generation. Fantástico Mundo de Bobby, which is a cartoon for kids, and I feel I'm quite similar to this character who everything that he listens, he suddenly imagine the literal event. So it's quite funny when it comes to expressions, because of course expressions collapse a lot of the meanings, and that's when poetics become. And I think that's how I understand my way of moving through the world. So I think language for me is a body in itself, and it's the way that allows me to move and to transition from place to place. And I feel more and more dance and language are becoming the same thing for me, if that makes any sense. And thank you for the question.
Thank you. So, Janaina, thank you so much. We come to an end, unfortunately, of your time. Do you like to wrap in a minute, something at the end? Before
Yes.
we present the next speaker. Sorry, it's just like to keep,
Yes,
time.
that's all good. Thank you. I think I stopped sharing my screen. And yeah, just again, return to the appreciation of being able to share this work and experiment with trying to language it. I know it is sometimes very confusing for me as well, and I think, and I didn't get to this point yet, but confusion also becoming something that we can embrace and acknowledge and honor as a practice of bringing us together to question and to say, but what do we mean by that? So I really appreciate that we allowing ourselves this time and space to co-fuse our conversations, and I'm really looking forward to listen to the next speakers. Thank you so much.